Hello and welcome. You're watching this very special interaction on ET Now on the occasion of 75 years of India's independence with the industrialists and people who have shaped the Indian economy in the last decades. And one such individual and their business we'll talk about is Mr. Ajay Piramal of Piramal Enterprises is in conversation with us on this occasion. Mr. Piramal, thanks very much for your time talking to us on ET Now.
My pleasure.
So, I was just looking at Piramal Enterprises story. It's a company started off in '84, and over the last 3.5 decades, because we are at a milestone in our own journey as a country at 75 years. We started off with $60 per capita and $47 or $50, and now at $2,200. Let's start by getting your thoughts, how you have seen the Indian economy shape up in last 3-4 decades, and if you could share some of your views are there.
I'm going to share with you what the recent Commonwealth Games has done. In that some way reflects what is the new India. Take the example of an athlete like Avinash Sable.
Yeah.
This fellow, coming from a very poor, humble background, rises to take a silver in the 3,000 steeplechase, which we have never done before. I mean, till now, for so many decades, it was the Kenyans who were there. And this guy comes in and he almost wins the gold. I mean, the difference between him and the first was only 0.05 seconds. Or look at Manas Joshi. She was the Para-Olympian. She's the world champion, Para-Olympian, world badminton champion with 7 golds, 7 silvers. Or look at Sharat Kamal. 40 years old, and he wins a gold. And on the other side, you have a Lakshay Sen, who's 20 years old and wins a gold. This would not have happened in the 80s or the 90s when India was there. So this is the big change that I find in India. Today, it is a confident India. Today is an India where people want to do better across different formats, men, women, ages 20 to 40, Para-Olympians, and from different backgrounds. So I think that is the big change that I find in India. And wherever you go today, Indians are much more respected today. When we would travel in the 80s, you would go abroad, Indians were not really looked upon well. Your Indian passport was not something that people would be proud of. But today I can say that it's not only me, but the younger generation has a greater confidence in themselves. So that is the big change.
So when you travel to Europe or US related to your business or even personal travels and interact with people there, your friend circle, some investors, business alliances, the way they look at India now, all of that has undergone a big change versus some decades back?
It has gone a lot of change. And particularly, I would say in the last 3 years, we've had some big issues in the world, whether it was the crisis of COVID, whether it's now been the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And that has actually brought about a significant difference in how the India is looked upon today. I think uniformly across the world, people look at India in a different way. The way we handled the COVID crisis, for instance, to do 200 crore vaccinations, that also made in India in such a short time is not a small feat. The Cowin application on the mobile is another significant development. I mean, these are applications which even the most advanced countries don't have. The way the digital, that direct benefit transfer and the whole digitization process has been a plus. Fact that we could give 80 crore Indians food for so many rations for so many months on end is another thing. So I think that has been a very positive thing. Also, the big difference I find today is that the India today, as far as the Russian-Ukraine crisis took place, India took its own independent stance. And at first, it was criticized a lot by the, especially by the Western governments and the Western media. But we stood our ground, and now it is being appreciated what we did. I mean, you're seeing the issues that have come up in Europe, in Germany, about all the oil and the gas, and India stood its ground and it is respected. And finally, look at the economy. I mean, the big change I find that when you travel, and I've been traveling the last few months, a few times I've been to the US, to Europe, I find that they are talking about recession, and you can see that recession is coming about. There's a sense of gloom there. But today, India, and even they think, we are talking of a recession means what? That people say that instead of 7.5%, if you come down to 7%, it's plus. So that's the big difference. Another major difference, I think the first time I'm seeing in many, many years, that the inflation in India is actually lower than the inflation which is there either in the US, whether it's in UK, whether it's in the rest of Europe. So these are big fundamental changes, and we must recognize that.
Yeah, in fact, recently in one of our conversations with our network, Mr. Jaishankar, our foreign minister, was mentioning he went to a restaurant with his son in US, and he actually took out his phone and showed his vaccine certificate, and whereas the son who was studying there took out a piece of paper and started showing him the vaccine.
That's true.
That was the big difference he was talking about.
And direct benefit transfer, we could do it. It went to the person who was the beneficiary directly. This could not have happened in the US. In fact, they were wondering how it happened. So many people got that.
In fact, who better than us who track the stock markets know exactly that the money which the government intended to give to the population there in the US, large part of it actually came into the stock market. Whereas in our case, the money was actually utilized, the resources were actually utilized to take care of the families. And your financial services business have roots now towards Bharat, because I've seen some of your interactions and our interaction, and your investor presentations explicitly talk about focus on Bharat. How are you looking at the Bharat of today versus Bharat of yesterday or yesteryears? I mean to ask, that's the smaller towns and all of that. Do you see a much more modern Bharat now?
Definitely, there's a Bharat which is getting more and more linked into the whole economy. Because one, look at digitization, look at the whole network of roads that is spreading up. That itself connects the countries. It is the whole communication. The mobile has been a game changer as far as bringing Bharat and, let's say, the India together as one. So all this means that there's much more of communication. And they also realize they have aspirations. They have also, now they are learning more, they are more studying more. And therefore it's becoming one more and more. There are still parts of India which need to get it done. But overall, yes, I'm very positive about it.
Right. Some of the big trends which you are observing, be it use of credit to boost not only personal life, personal loans, but business, SME. The use of credit, because credit availability itself, if you compare it last couple of decades, was very low, and we all know about the local money lender business, and now the availability of credit changed. That was a big trend, and your company also wants to build more on that. How do you see that take shape from here on?
We want to build more on this in terms of credit. Yes, availability has increased, but I still feel that not enough credit is available, especially you talked about the MSMEs and all that. So if you look at the data, in India, the total credit to GDP is only about 60% of the GDP is in terms of credit, which is, in the formal sector, right? But in the US, in China, other developed countries, it is a multiple of GDP. And therefore, we have to do more to see that credit is available. Because the cost of credit, when it is in the formal sector, is much lower than what the informal sector or the money lenders would do. It would be maybe 30-40% of that. Yeah. And for MSMEs, getting access to formal credit is still a challenge. That's why companies like us are going into tier 2, tier 3 cities. But overall, I think it is important for the government and the RBI to ensure that more and more credit is available. And this credit can actually be only done by NBFCs, and therefore to allow them to grow is actually as important for the economy as anybody else. Because India is, if you have to give adequate employment and to have generate wealth for, the tier 2, the tier 3 cities, getting the MSMEs going is very, very critical.
How is the quality of, or because of CIBIL, etc., there's also a big change happened in the society over the years, that the quality of credit, how do you underwrite the quality of credit and the risks which are coming along by distributing credit in the lower strata, how has that changed?
So it has changed significantly. I think again the whole the CIBIL, the digitization, and what we are doing in terms of getting credit, the whole aggregator model that the RBI is now initiated. This has meant that actually there's a lot of data which is available to people to take credit decisions. And it's also reflected in the quality of, so the NPAs in the system have come down, and so it's made the financial system stronger.
So companies such as yours, a lot of practices which you are adopting at your own company and industry practices by and large, do you see that financial services and the growth of this business has good runway of 20, 30 years ahead with low risks now compared to how they used to be earlier?
So there's no question that if India has to grow, financial services has to grow. Normally, financial services, like if we take an 7-8% as the real growth rate, if you add inflation to it, it would be, let's say, 12-13%. And normally, credit grows at least 1.5 times that. So to get any industry or any business where 16 to 18% should be the annual growth rate is a good industry to be in. And India is in that place. And therefore, we must allow this to grow. And that's where I feel that it's important. If we want growth, which is important so that our poverty reduces, we have to encourage more and more credit.
How do you see the role of institutions like RBI, government, and the entire regulatory framework overall, not only the near term but last couple of decades to shape
I
growth?
think I want to talk about the role of the government and the RBI since the COVID crisis.
Okay.
I think we've done really exemplary work. If you look at it, the amount of, at one time there was a lot of criticism that we are not giving enough liquidity to the system, we are not supporting the businesses, we are not supporting individuals. But if you now look, even today, I think we have come out of the crisis much stronger than actually most other
and without
economies.
damaging the country's balance sheet.
Yes, without damaging the country's balance sheet. And we have saved people's lives. We have also, though there was liquidity given, but it was measured liquidity given. And therefore, today you're not feeling the strain of everybody pulling back. Even now, the RBI has pulled back on liquidity, but it has done a gradual process, so it has not affected business or industry. So I would actually compliment both the government and the RBI.
What are your thoughts on, the argument which is coming on the table is that the quality of growth globally is deteriorating for whatever reasons, be it Ukraine or COVID, after effects of COVID, etc., or orchestrated slowdown to cool inflation in the US. There is one argument which says India will actually stand out. The other argument says that we may not be fully insulated. Where would you stand? Because you have both the businesses, a global business and a local business.
So if you say that India will stand out, yes. As I said before also, we are talking of recession in the US. Recession means what? 2 quarters of minus growth. So India is not in that.
Sure.
We are not in a minus situation. I think it's still plus, so it will stand out. And this is the same whether it's in the UK, whether it's in the rest of Europe. So that's one point. Will it slow down? Yeah, there will be a marginal effect. So, okay, if we were going to grow at 7.5%, we may go at 6.5%, 7%. But that's all the difference, at least I see. I'm not seeing that change now. And I keep watching this because, again, everybody talks about it and there is a concern. But there are challenges. I don't want to say that country doesn't have challenges.
Let's talk about some of the challenges which come to your mind.
So one challenge as I see it is that today is the unknown. You don't know where risks come from. Who would have thought 4 years ago, all the risk people, that the COVID would shut down the whole world. No travel would have been possible for 2 years. You never thought about that. Who would have thought about the Russian-Ukraine crisis? If this was the case that Russia will stop supply or the supply of gas to Germany will not be there, I mean, then Germany wouldn't have been so dependent on Russian.
Yes.
So that's it. So there are unknowns. I don't know what else can happen, but you have to be just prepared for an unknown. That's one challenge. But I think there are other challenges as far as we are concerned. We spoke about if the global thing, what will be the impact on India. Yes, there will be something. But I think fundamentally there are other challenges which we should also look at. One is in the space of education. India has some of the finest minds, and yes, those are the people who go into the IITs and you go to other engineering colleges and all and make a name. But the rest of India, the bottom part of India is still behind. If you look at global rankings in the status of education, we rank amongst the lowest. And so that is a big challenge that we have to look at. And actually there are solutions. I can give you an example. So there was you would consider till a few years ago, Rajasthan was a state which was known as a Bimaru state.
Yes.
But there was a national assessment survey was done recently. In the state, the changes in the level of school education, I mean the output of school learning levels, and you'll be surprised that actually Rajasthan had the most change. And Jhunjhunu district, which is again in Rajasthan, where actually our vice president comes from, was the second highest in terms of learning levels all over the country. I could tell you that this is also to some extent a small measure of the work that we have been doing in both Rajasthan and Jhunjhunu for the last 15 years. We've been trying to improve school learning levels. But again, education to raise the level is very important. The new education policy actually is in the right direction. I think it's a good policy from what I see in when I look at our own Piramal Foundation, when I look at Pratham, which I also chair. These are good policies. Now it's for the states to implement it. Similarly, I think a very other important part is that whereas India is growing, wealth is being created, but there's one part of India where still a lot more needs to be done. And this is the aspirational districts, which again the Prime Minister has identified 112 districts, which are the ones which are actually the behind in most of the social indicators. This constitutes 16% of India's population. Unfortunately, only 1.5% of the CSR funding of India goes there. So how do we improve this, whether it is education, whether it is health, whether it's in clean drinking water? Because you cannot leave this part of the population left behind. Otherwise, you'll have a problem. And look at another area is the tribal health. Tribal health is also very important. We cannot, I mean, there are like tribals form 10% of India's population.
Just imagine.
And again, they are being ignored. So at least we as a foundation are focusing on this so that we can also, as Prime Minister says in the Amrit Kal, how can we bring these people as the mainstream of the country is as important as anything else. So these are some of the challenges that I see.
And your group and your house is actually doing a lot of good work in that. In fact, this message also goes to a lot of other organizations who may be watching us to take their step and which is due on them to make the kind of society much more inclusive in terms of growth opportunities.
It's a big it's a big effort. All of us have to do it together. No one person or nobody can do it alone. I think together we can take our country forward.
Mr. Piramal, just a quick word on your businesses. Let's talk about the pharma business. There is a sense in the industry now that perhaps the best of the years of the pharma model, which a lot of Indian companies adopted, that low cost, high quality generic production and will export to the world with mother market US. That model may be behind its prime. And now one needs to be in the value added and other spaces which may be sunrise in the overall healthcare scheme. What are your thoughts there, and how's your pharma business all shaping up?
So India has established itself today as a global manufacturer of pharmaceuticals. There is no question of high quality pharmaceuticals. But yes, because in earlier on days, because there were restricted suppliers of generic pharmaceuticals, you could get a good value. But now, because of the increasing competition from both within India and outside, the values of these have come down. And there is a lot of aggressive price pressure being put, and therefore this is not as profitable as it used to be. And it is the time when you need to have, even if it's in generic specialty products or more complex products. And in fact, that's what our firm has been doing right from the beginning. These are complex generic products. So they could be injectables, they could be something which is more difficult to make and not as easy to make as a simple formulation. So that's where the world is going, and we will go. Doesn't mean that there will be no need, there will be no requirement for basic generics. There will be, but those prices will be at a very low level. It's here where when you add technology, there's some science to it, there's some complex manufacturing where there will be.
And what about your financial services business? It's a twin engine aircraft now with one acquired engine and one your own engine put together,
so
coming beautifully.
Yeah, I think again, DHFL, the merger has taken place, and I am happy to say that it has gone off well. This was a big effort. As you know, this was the first and the largest sort of merger which was done by under the RBI supervision for banking, and we also paid almost 46% of the value to banks. So this was significant for the whole system. And I'm happy to say that we've been able to actually, and we are really lending to people who have, it's difficult for them to get credit. So our average loan is like 15 lakhs, which is much, of a home loan, which is much lower than what others are. So I think we've done well in that, and the twin end strategy is, one is of course wholesale as well as retail, and in retail twin that some of it is just digital, the other is physical, so as we like to call it phygital.
So now you'll have to, you're looking at 2-3 years runway ahead to extract value from this transaction. That much time do you see the full potential will be realized?
The potential is, yes, it will come out, and we are actually investing more and more in terms of expanding our network, and also, yes.
All right, Mr. Piramal, thank you very much for this chat today. I'm sure our viewers and a lot of your shareholders will enjoy this differentiated talk with you today, because usually we focus so much on your company and it's the shareholder oriented chat. But today, your worldview and overall thoughts. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Ajay.
Thank you.